Nobody told you that you weren't allowed to feel things. Nobody sat you down and explained the rules. Nobody handed you a list of which emotions were acceptable and which ones needed to disappear. It happened quietly, gradually, through 1,000 small moments that your nervous system recorded, even when your conscious mind didn't. And the result is an adult who is exhausted in a way they can't fully explain, who finds it almost impossible to ask for help, who says, "I'm fine," so automatically they've stopped noticing when they're not, who has spent so long managing how they appear on the outside that they've lost track of what's actually happening on the inside. If that sounds familiar, this video was made for you. Because what happened to you had a name. It has a psychological explanation, and understanding it is the first step toward finally putting it down. Let's start at the beginning. When you were born, you arrived with a full emotional range already installed. Joy, fear, sadness, anger, excitement, grief. All of it was there from the start. And as a baby and a very young child, you expressed all of it freely. You cried when you were scared. You screamed when you were angry. You laughed without caring who was watching. You had no filter because you had no reason to build one yet. But then something started to happen. The world around you began to respond to your emotions in ways that taught you what was safe to show and what wasn't. Maybe it was obvious. A parent who raised their voice when you cried. A caregiver who called you dramatic when you were upset. A home where anger was punished swiftly and visibly, so you learned very young that being angry had consequences. Or maybe it was subtle. A parent who simply went quiet when you expressed difficult emotions. Not cruel, just uncomfortable, just not equipped. A family culture where everyone stayed busy and cheerful and problems were never discussed directly. A childhood where the unspoken rule was, "We don't talk about hard things here." Either way, your brain did something remarkable. It adapted. Because that's what children's brains do. They are survival machines. And a child who learns that expressing certain emotions creates distance, conflict, or discomfort in the people they depend on for survival will very quickly learn to stop expressing those emotions. Not because they stop feeling them, but because they learn to hide them, and hiding them feels like safety. For a child in that environment, hiding them is safety. That's the part that's important to understand. Emotional suppression in childhood is not weakness. It is not dysfunction. It is an intelligent adaptation to an environment that couldn't hold your full emotional experience. The problem is, the adaptation doesn't switch off when the environment changes. You grew up. You left that home. The people who couldn't handle your emotions are no longer in every room with you. But the nervous system you built in response to them came with you. And it's still running the same programming. Still scanning every room for signs that your emotions are too much. Still editing yourself before you speak. Still feeling a flash of anxiety when someone asks how you really are. Still reaching for, "I'm fine," before you've even checked whether you are. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in your adult life. Because this is the part where I want you to feel genuinely seen. You are probably the person in your friend group who everyone comes to with their problems. You are a good listener. You are steady. You are reliable. You give excellent advice and you hold space for other people's pain without flinching. But when something is wrong with you, and something is wrong sometimes because you are human, you go quiet. You handle it alone. You wait until it passes. And if someone notices and asks, you minimize it immediately. You make it smaller than it is. You wrap it up quickly and redirect the conversation back to them. Because being needed feels safe. Being vulnerable feels dangerous. You probably also have a tendency to apologize constantly. For taking up space. For having an opinion. For needing something. The word sorry comes out of you reflexively, automatically. Often before you've even assessed whether there's anything to apologize for. That's not politeness. That's a nervous system that learned very early that your needs and your feelings were an inconvenience to the people around you. And then there's the anger. This one is particularly important. People who grew up suppressing emotions often have a very complicated relationship with anger specifically. Either they feel it almost never, it's been so thoroughly buried that it barely registers anymore, or it comes out sideways, in sarcasm, in passive aggression, in a sudden disproportionate reaction to something small that catches everyone, including themselves, off guard. That disproportionate reaction is not who you are. It's a pressure valve releasing. It's what happens when feelings have nowhere legitimate to go for long enough. They find their own exit whether you choose one or not. Now here is where it gets physically real, because this is the part most people don't know. Emotional suppression is not just a psychological pattern. It is a physical one. Your body is involved in this in ways that explain a lot of symptoms you may have been managing for years without understanding their source. When you suppress an emotion, your body prepares to express it and then stops. The muscles engage. The nervous system activates. And then, instead of completing the cycle, instead of the emotion moving through you and releasing, it gets held, frozen in place, stored in the body as chronic tension. That's why people who grew up suppressing emotions so often carry tightness in their shoulders and neck that never fully releases no matter how much they stretch. Why their jaw aches from clenching in their sleep. Why their stomach is constantly unsettled. Why their chest feels tight in ways that have been checked medically and come back clear. Your body has been holding what your mind refused to process. And it has been doing that work for years. There is also the exhaustion. The specific, deep, sleep-resistant exhaustion that so many emotionally suppressed people describe. The kind where you wake up after 8 hours and still feel tired. Where rest doesn't restore you the way it should. That exhaustion is the cost of containment, of editing, of constant vigilance over your own emotional expression. Your nervous system has been working overtime for years, keeping everything managed and contained and presentable. And that is genuinely tiring work, even though from the outside and often from your own perspective, it looks like you're doing nothing at all. Now I want to introduce something that might shift how you see all of this. Here is the counterintuitive truth about emotional suppression. The people who suppress their emotions most effectively are often the most emotionally intelligent people in the room. They are deeply attuned to other people's feelings. They read rooms accurately and instantly. They know when someone is upset before that person has said a word. They are extraordinarily good at managing emotional environments. Because they had to be. They grew up in environments where reading and managing emotions was a survival skill. They became experts at it out of necessity. The tragedy is that all of that skill, all of that emotional intelligence, was directed outward, toward keeping other people comfortable, toward managing other people's emotional states. While their own emotional world went largely unattended, you became fluent in everyone else's feelings and a stranger to your own. And that's not a character flaw. That's the logical outcome of the environment you were in. You were trained to be a caretaker of other people's emotional experiences. Nobody trained you to be a caretaker of your own. So let's talk about what begins to change when you start doing that work. I want to be honest with you here. The beginning of this process doesn't feel like relief. That's important to say clearly because a lot of people start and then get frightened by what they encounter and think something has gone wrong. When you stop suppressing, when you create real space for your emotional experience for the first time, what you will likely meet first is a backlog. Feelings that have been waiting. Old grief. Old anger. Sadness about things that happened years ago that you never fully allowed yourself to feel at the time. It can feel like everything arriving at once. It can feel like falling apart. But here is what's actually happening. Your nervous system has decided you are finally safe enough to process what it couldn't process then. The feelings aren't new. They're old, and they've been stored in your body, waiting for the conditions to finally be right for them to move through. The crying that seems to come from nowhere. The unexpected anger. The sudden grief over something from your past. That is not a breakdown. That is healing in progress. That is your system finally completing cycles. It was forced to interrupt years ago. It is messy. It is non-linear. It does not happen on a schedule. But on the other side of it is something that many people who have been through it describe the same way: lightness. A physical lightness in the body. A quieting of the background noise that they had been so accustomed to, they stopped hearing it. And a relationship with themselves that finally feels honest. So, what are the actual shifts that begin this process? I want to give you 2 that are real and accessible, not 10 things that overwhelm you into doing nothing. The first is this: start noticing your emotions before you manage them. Not expressing them necessarily. Not yet. Just noticing. When something happens, when someone says something that lands badly, when you feel the familiar tightening in your chest, when the automatic "I'm fine" response comes up, pause for just a moment before the management kicks in, and ask yourself honestly, what am I actually feeling right now? Not what should I be feeling? Not what is reasonable to feel. What am I actually feeling? You don't have to do anything with the answer yet. You just have to let yourself know it. That small act of internal honesty, of not immediately suppressing the awareness itself, is the beginning of everything. The second shift is giving your emotions somewhere to go that feels safe. For many people who were raised in emotionally suppressive environments, other people don't feel safe yet as a place to bring their feelings. And that's okay. You don't have to start there. Write it down. Speak it out loud to yourself in the car. Find a therapist or counselor who creates a genuinely safe container. Move your body. Run, walk, dance. Anything that gives the physical activation of emotions somewhere legitimate to go. The goal is to break the pattern of feelings going nowhere, of everything being held and managed and contained indefinitely. Even a small outlet, even just writing 3 honest sentences at the end of the day about what you actually felt, begins to shift the system. Your emotions were never the problem. They were always information. They were always signals pointing toward what you needed, what hurt you, what mattered to you, what you valued. You just grew up in a place that couldn't receive that information, so you stopped sending it, even to yourself. But you are not in that place anymore. And the version of you that learned to go silent to survive, they did an extraordinary job of getting you here. They protected you when protection was what was needed. Now what's needed is something different. Now what's needed is to come back to yourself, to stop managing your inner world for everyone else's comfort and start tending to it for your own. Not all at once. Not perfectly. Just honestly. One feeling at a time. If this video describes something you've been living with and never had the words for, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below with the word healing, because I want to know how many of you are in the middle of this right now. You are not alone in it. See you in the next one.